Streaming platforms, whether you love them or hate them, it is safe to say that DJing with streaming platforms is very much here to stay. And with many platforms now available directly in your DJ software, it has made DJing far more accessible to far more people. Now, streaming platforms are absolutely fantastic for beginner DJs, people that want to learn, and people that aren't taking things too seriously, just the casual users. But the moment you go from that to accepting paid bookings, then the rulebook changes completely. And if you ask any experienced DJ what platform they use to primarily DJ with, I can guarantee you it is not a Spotify playlist. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly why the pros do not use streaming platforms as their primary source of music, but also how to make that transition to professional DJ if that is the path that you have in mind for yourself. So reason number one why a lot of pro DJs will not use streaming services as their primary source of music is, depending on the service that you use, you need a stable internet connection at all times. And trust me, that is very hard to find in a lot of venues. When it comes to using services like Apple Music, Spotify, I believe SoundCloud as well, you have to have an internet connection at all times. The moment that internet connection drops is the moment that your music stops. And ultimately, if a client is paying me to play music, then I need to keep the music going at all times. Now, there are some alternatives to this. Services like Beatport and BeatSource, they are dedicated DJ streaming platforms, and if you subscribe to their premium service, you do get access to an offline locker. However, those services do come at a very premium price. For a lot of the lower level consumer type streaming services, you are going to need an internet connection at all times, and that is not ideal in a lot of venues. And trust me, okay, that is an extra thing that you really don't want to be worrying about on the night. You just want to crack on and play your tracks. Factor number two, and that is reliance on third-party services. Now, we've already touched upon this a little bit with the whole internet connection piece, but you are also reliant on the company maintaining that subscription service, so Spotify, Apple Music, whoever you use, being available and being reliable at all times. Now, this is actually quite timely that I mention this, because recently there was a period where Spotify actually went down within DJ platforms for a period of 9 days. Now, if that is your only source of music, there is a time where you can't actually DJ. And it's not a good look if you are being paid by a client or a nightclub or whoever it might be, turning up to the gig and saying, well, I actually can't DJ tonight. Why is that? Well, because Spotify is down. When's it going to be back up and running? Well, I don't know. It does make things look a little bit silly. And yes, okay, you can mitigate some of that risk by having a Spotify and Apple Music subscription, so there are ways around this, but of course that is going to come at an extra cost to you. And also as well, if you use Spotify as your primary source with all your playlists organized there, and you have to move over to Apple Music, then you're having to start again from scratch, building all your playlists, your cue points, all of that kind of stuff. Factor number three, and that is you do not own any of the music contained within the platforms that are providing you the service. You are effectively renting them for as long as you are a paying subscriber. Now, you may not care about owning your own tracks, and that's absolutely fine. We've spoken on this channel before about how music is no longer as timeless as it used to be and has a shelf life. And so you may not want to own every single copy of every single track. That's fine. However, the service that you are provided is only as good for as long as you are paying for it. Now, I've had it before when I've gone on holiday, I've missed a subscription payment because there's been a bit of an issue with the bank for whatever reason. I've come home and I've realized, oh, I actually don't have access to the service. And so it could be through accidental reasons that you are no longer a subscriber. And could you imagine the embarrassment if something like that happens mid-gig? Because that service will just suddenly get cut off. It will cause you a lot of undue stress in the moment, trying to figure out what has gone wrong. In addition, because you don't own the tracks, you do not have control over the actual library, the database of songs. Spotify, Apple Music, Tidal, whoever you are using, do have the right at any moment to add or remove tracks from the database. And so if you've got a few tracks in your playlists, you may find one day that those tracks that you've been using and you want to play out suddenly disappear. And that is because Spotify, Apple Music, whoever it is, tidy up their libraries from time to time, which can be quite frustrating. And again, I'm not saying that that happens all the time, but it is definitely a risk. You have absolutely no control over their library, and they can do basically whatever they want to it at whatever time they want to. Couple of other quick factors to mention before we talk about transitioning away from streaming platforms for paid bookings is you cannot record directly in your DJ software. There are ways around it if you are using streaming platforms. I do have a dedicated video on the channel all about recording DJ mixes. Check the link in the description for that one. The other thing as well is that depending on what streaming platform you use, you may or may not be able to use stems. Apple Music and Spotify do not support stem usage, but if you do subscribe to something like Beatsource or Beatport, they do. So it just depends on what streaming platform you use. But in addition to this, above everything else, streaming just adds an extra layer of potential stress and anxiety to your DJ gigs. Now, DJing is stressful enough as it is. You have to concentrate on the crowd, playing the right song for the right moment, the right time to keep that crowd on the dance floor, keep your client happy, keep your manager happy. And there are so many other things that can potentially go wrong on a technical side, because obviously you're working with quite complex equipment. It could be the lighting, it could be the crowd aren't happy. And so really your attention needs to be on what is in front of you and what is in the remit of your control. And streaming, unfortunately, is just one of those things where you cannot control it. And if it goes wrong, a lot of the time it is very, very difficult to fix. And so when it comes to DJing, I always think you want to have as much control on as much of the elements as possible to alleviate a lot of the stress and anxiety that comes with actually playing out to a crowd. So with all of that in mind, how do you make that transition from casual DJ at home with a solid internet connection to a DJ that is playing out live to a crowd with an unknown internet connection in a venue? And really this is all down to mindset shift. Rather than DJing with Spotify and seeing it as your primary source of music, it becomes a musical discovery tool. That's how I use it in my own workflow. So there are key playlists that I follow and I track on a weekly basis. I will test those tracks that are added to those playlists when I'm practicing at home, seeing how they sound, do they work well with other tracks that I have in my collection. And then if I think they have a place in my DJ set, I will then go and download a handful of those tracks to add to my actual musical collection. That music collection is stored locally on my laptop USB stick, and that's what I will use to DJ with. I do not want to be at my DJ gigs reliant on a third party, and so I always have my tracks stored locally. And so it's a mindset shift from using Spotify as a DJ service to more of a music discovery service, and then having the collection that you're going to play out live stored locally, so it is truly your collection. Now you can of course do this approach with certain streaming platforms that I mentioned earlier, like Beatport, Beatsource, but that is my mindset shift with how I use Spotify. So it still plays an important part in my workflow, but it is music discovery only. Now, don't get me wrong, if I'm DJing to a crowd where I have a ton of requests and I don't actually own the music, then I still sometimes will dip in a little bit to Spotify. The odd track that I don't own that I want to play, I will log into Spotify and play it, but that is dependent on the Wi-Fi that I can try and connect to in the venue, and also as well, you know, if I can't get Wi-Fi, then hotspotting my phone. But I will always do a test in the headphones first to make sure that the track is actually playing. But that is few and far between as a bit of a backup choice. And that is how I use streaming platforms in my DJ sets. Hope you found this video useful. Big shout out to my members as always, and welcome to a brand new member for this week. And I will catch you in the next video.